That night was my 70th birthday. I had reserved table 14 at the Lexington room, the same table where my late wife and I used to sit on special occasions. I wore a suit and brought a small photo of her with me. All I wanted was a proper meal, just to quietly tell myself, I'm still here. But the moment I stepped up to the reception desk, the manager looked at me like I was some kind of troublemaker. I'm sorry, sir. We can't serve you tonight. At first, I thought there must have been a mistake with my reservation. I gave them my name and showed the confirmation. She shook her head and lowered her voice. Your daughter called earlier. She said you have... I called my daughter right there on the spot. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. Outside, it was raining. I stood in front of the restaurant's glass doors, pushed out like someone unfit to sit down for a meal on his own birthday. I'm not telling this story so people can sit there and feel sorry for me. I'm telling it because sometimes the deepest stab doesn't come from an enemy. It comes from someone who shares your last name. And it hurts the most when it's wrapped in an excuse like, it's for your own good. If you're still watching this, leave a comment saying where you're from. I want to know how many older people out there are treated like something that needs to be put away just because they're no longer convenient for someone else. I might change a few small details to protect the real people involved, but the lesson stays the same. When someone starts labeling you as confused or losing your memory, they're often preparing to take something from you. I stood there in the rain, gripping the photo of my wife, and made myself a promise. If my daughter wants to turn me into a man who's lost his capacity, then I'll show her just how clear-headed I really am. My name is Arthur. Art Caldwell. I just turned 70, and my doctor told me something very plainly. My mind is still sharp. My heart is still strong. I'm nowhere near the point where someone can lead me around like a child. I believe that. I need to believe that. My wife, Rose, passed away 3 years ago. Ever since she left, the house has felt bigger than it used to, mostly because it's missing the sound of her voice. And table 14 at the Lexington room is the only place where I still feel like I can sit with Rose again, even if it's only with a small photograph tucked in my jacket pocket. Tonight, I was supposed to sit there, order Rose's favorite dish, place her photo on the edge of the table, and quietly wish myself a proper birthday. But Diana, my daughter, had called ahead to turn me into a confused old man in front of strangers. I stood in the rain, looking at the restaurant lights, and realized something. This was no longer about dinner. It had become a fight for my dignity. The manager didn't raise her voice. She spoke just softly enough to sound polite, but clearly enough that every word landed like an insult. Mr. Caldwell, we were notified by your family in advance. Your daughter said you sometimes have episodes, that you might panic, make noise, and disturb the other guests. I stood there, frozen. I pulled out my phone, opened my doctor's appointment record, and told her I was perfectly clear-headed. I showed her the reservation confirmation. I told her I only wanted to sit down and eat one simple meal, but she didn't look at the proof. She looked at me the way people look at a liability they'd rather remove. We can't risk something unfortunate happening tonight, so I turned and called Diana Caldwell right there in front of them. The phone rang and rang, then went to voicemail. No explanation. No callback. Inside the restaurant, people were laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating. Outside, I stood in the rain, gripping Rose's photo in my hand, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it feels like to be treated like someone who no longer has the right to simply exist as a person. And that label Diana put on me, confused, losing it, wasn't because she was worried about me. It was to silence me. I stepped back from the restaurant door like someone who had just been slapped but wasn't allowed to react. The rain soaked through my shoulders, cold but not as cold as the way people looked at me, like I was a problem they needed to avoid. I stood under the awning across the street and looked through the glass. Inside, one family was laughing. Another older man was raising a glass in a toast, and I caught myself asking a question I hated, even thinking, what if I really am losing my mind? 3 years after Rose died, I did talk to her photograph sometimes. I woke up in the middle of the night, thinking I heard her voice. I misplaced my keys and tore the house apart looking for them. Things like that. They're enough for someone to turn into a story about dementia, if they want to. And Diana wanted to. I gripped the photo of Rose in my pocket. It felt like the last thread keeping me from falling over the edge. I took a deep breath and told myself, no, you're not crazy, Art. You're being pushed into that label. Right then, I knew I had to do two things: stay calm and find out what Diana was hiding. I was standing quietly under the awning when a man's voice came from behind me. Sir, are you okay? I turned and saw a man in his early 30s, holding the hand of a little girl who looked about 7. He was dressed simply, and when he looked at me, there was no curiosity in his eyes, just genuine concern. He introduced himself as Ethan Brooks. The little girl was Lily. Lily studied me for a moment, then asked the kind of question only a child would ask without hesitation. Grandpa, why are you standing in the rain? Are you sad today? Before I could answer, Ethan glanced toward the restaurant entrance and then back at me, as if he immediately understood what had just happened. You had a reservation and they wouldn't let you in? He asked. I nodded, my throat tight. Ethan didn't say something like, just forget about it. Instead, he said something simple, something that nearly broke me. No one deserves to be alone on their birthday. If you don't mind, come eat with us. Lily tugged on my sleeve and gave a little command of her own. Come with us. I'm not letting you stand out here anymore. And in that moment, I understood something. Sometimes, the person who saves you isn't family. It's a kind stranger who shows up at the right time. Ethan took Lily's hand and walked straight toward the restaurant door, and I followed behind like someone who had just been pulled out of the mud. I expected them to stop me again, to repeat the same line about how my family had called ahead. And sure enough, the moment the manager saw me, her expression tightened. But this time, Ethan stepped forward first. He didn't shout. He just spoke calmly, firmly. We have a table, and he's sitting with us. The manager opened her mouth as if to protest, but Lily looked up and said something so innocent it landed like a slap. He didn't do anything bad. Why won't you let him have his birthday dinner? The manager was still fumbling for words when another staff member walked by, recognized Ethan, and greeted him in a familiar tone. Mr. Brooks. I saw the manager's expression change instantly, the look of someone realizing this wasn't a man she could easily brush aside. Ethan held her gaze and finished with one calm sentence. If there's a problem, you can talk to me. And just like that, they had to step aside. They let us in through the same doors that had pushed me out only minutes earlier. This time, it wasn't because anyone felt sorry for me. It was because someone decent had stepped up and demanded my dignity be respected. We sat down at a table near the fireplace. The warm yellow light and the quiet clinking of silverware made my body slowly relax, like I had just walked out of the rain and into another world. Ethan ordered food for Lily, then turned to me and asked gently, "What's your name, sir?" "Art Caldwell," I said, and suddenly I felt embarrassed, ashamed of the way I'd just been thrown out like a beggar. Lily studied me carefully and asked, straight to the point, "Is today your birthday? Then, do you have a cake yet?" I shook my head. The little girl immediately put on a serious face. "Then I'll tell them to bring one later. Birthdays have to have cake." Ethan chuckled and said warmly, "Lily and I come here a lot. It's not fancy or anything. It's just a safe place for the two of us." While we ate, Lily asked about Rose, my wife. I only told a short version, but even then, my throat tightened. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened, the way someone listens when they understand what loss feels like. And for the first time that day, I didn't feel like an old man with problems. I felt like a human being again. While Lily kept talking and laughing, I began noticing small details around me, the kind of habit you pick up after a lifetime of paying attention to things. My eyes just started scanning the room on their own. The girl tilted her head while asking questions the exact same way Diana used to when she was 7. Lily's smile had a small dimple on the left side of her cheek. Exactly the same. Even the way she frowned when she was thinking was so familiar it sent a chill down my spine. I told myself, that's impossible. It's just a coincidence. But the more I looked, the harder it became to call it a coincidence. Lily pulled a napkin closer, took some colored markers from her little bag, and began drawing. A few minutes later, she pushed the paper toward me, her eyes shining. "Mr. Art, I made this for you." On the paper was a drawing of a gray-haired man, a big birthday cake, and a line written in wobbly but clear letters. "Happy birthday, Grandpa Art." I froze. My throat tightened, like someone had grabbed it. Ethan gave an awkward little laugh. She calls people that sometimes. But to me, it didn't feel random at all. It felt like a door had just cracked open. A truth Diana might have buried even deeper than the confused old man label she pinned on me. The next morning, I woke up and Lily's drawing was still on the table, staring back at me like a splinter in my mind. I told myself, kids often resemble each other, that it meant nothing. But my heart didn't believe it. My heart kept whispering, too similar. I pulled out the old family photo albums, pictures of Diana when she was 6, 7, and I placed them beside Lily's drawing. The way the cake was drawn, the style of the letters, even the messy strokes made my skin prickle. It looked eerily like the birthday cards Diana used to make for her mother when she was little. Later, I called Ethan with a simple excuse. "I just wanted to thank you again for last night." Then I asked casually, as if it were nothing, "What year was Lily born? And her mother's name?" Ethan paused for a moment before answering. Then he told me something that made the air feel heavier. Lily's mother had left when the girl was just a newborn. All she left behind was a vague name, no address, no contact, nothing. I hung up the phone and sat there, replaying one single point in time over and over in my head. That year, Diana had disappeared for 8 months. She said she needed time to find herself. And for the first time, I understood why she had called the restaurant and labeled me as confused. It wasn't to protect me. It was to make sure I never had the chance to ask the right questions. At that point, I stopped guessing. When someone pushes you into a corner, you either fold or you start checking everything. So I started checking. I opened the safe where I kept my documents and went through my bank statements. Some months were missing copies, like someone had taken them before I could see them. I called the bank and asked for the full transaction history. That's when the ugly part showed up. Diana had been added to my account as an authorized user. At some point I couldn't even remember signing for. The money had started leaking out slowly. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. When I added everything up, nearly $85,000 had quietly disappeared. Then I found something else, something that made my stomach drop. In the cabinet drawer was a bottle of lorazepam. My name was printed on the label, but I had never seen the doctor who supposedly prescribed it. I knew exactly what that kind of medication could do. It makes people groggy, foggy, forgetful, exactly the kind of symptoms that could make someone look like they're slipping into dementia. A perfect way to make the label believable. Then, buried in a pile of paperwork, I found the thing that truly chilled me. A psychiatric evaluation stating that I was showing signs of cognitive decline and recommending that I require a legal guardian. I read down to the bottom of the page, the signature, and in that moment, I understood something very clearly. Diana wasn't just trying to hide Lily. She was preparing to take my life away on paper. Once I saw the missing $85,000 and that psychiatric report, everything pointed back to one moment in time. The months when Diana had suddenly disappeared from home. The more I lined up the timeline, the clearer one thing became. Diana didn't just want to label me as confused so she could drain my money. She also needed to bury a secret named Lily, because if Lily turned out to be my real granddaughter, everything Diana was trying to do would collapse instantly. At that point, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. So I called Ethan Brooks and asked if we could meet at a quiet cafe somewhere people wouldn't pay much attention. When he arrived, I slid an old photograph across the table. It was a picture of Diana Caldwell when she was about 24, the exact time she had supposedly gone off to Portland. I didn't bother with small talk. Ethan, what did you say Lily's mother's name was? He looked down at his coffee for a moment before answering. She said her name was Elena, he replied quietly. No last name, no family, no social media, no address, just a name and a promise she'd come back someday. I slid the photo closer to him, my voice rough. Look carefully. Ethan picked it up. His eyes widened little by little. He swallowed hard, looked at me, then back at the photo again like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. God, it's the same person. This is Elena. I nodded, my heart pounding heavy in my chest. Then Lily isn't just your daughter, she's my granddaughter. And in that moment, everything clicked into place. I finally understood why Diana had called the restaurant to label me as confused. She wasn't just after my money. She was afraid I would find Lily. Ethan sat there in silence for a while, staring at the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost careful, like he was afraid the truth might disappear if he said it too loudly. If this is real, then we need something nobody can argue with. I nodded. I was done with words. What I needed now was proof. So Ethan and I agreed on the quietest way possible to do a DNA test. No drama, no attention that might alert Diana. Ethan ordered a legal testing kit and collected Lily's sample in the simplest way he could, using things she already used every day. A small hairbrush and an old toothbrush he had kept. Nothing that would scare her, nothing that would make the child feel like she was being investigated. I sent in my own sample that same day, and while we waited for the results, my mind ran in circles. Part of me was afraid because if Lily really was my granddaughter, that meant Diana had abandoned her own child. And another part of me burned with anger. Because Diana hadn't just walked away from Lily, she had come back later and tried to label me as confused, take my money, and bury the truth along with it. Waiting for those results felt like sitting on the edge of a storm. A week later, the email with the results arrived. Ethan opened it first. He read the screen, then looked at me like the air had just left his lungs. Art, 99.97%. I was Lily's biological grandfather, and from that moment on, Diana had nowhere left to hide. I didn't wait for Diana to confess. Ethan and I went straight to the office building, where she worked, a polished, expensive place where she liked to present herself as respectable and successful. When Diana stepped out of the elevator and saw me standing there, she froze. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I simply placed the envelope with the DNA results on the reception desk and slid it toward her. Lily Brooks is your daughter, I said calmly, and my granddaughter, 99.97%. Diana's face went pale for a split second, then she snapped straight into defense mode, like she had rehearsed it 100 times. She gave a short, mocking laugh and turned to the receptionist. He's having another episode, she said casually. My father's been confused lately. Memory problems. I looked at her, my voice cold as stone. You called the restaurant and told them I was losing my mind for the same reason, didn't you? Diana's jaw tightened. She leaned closer to me and whispered through clenched teeth, "You don't have any real proof. And if you try to make a scene, you'll lose everything." Ethan stepped forward, calm but firm. "We have the DNA. And we have a lot more than that." Diana turned away. Her hand trembled just slightly, but she still forced that polished, respectable smile back onto her face, like nothing had happened. And in that moment, I understood something chilling. My daughter wasn't just hiding a child. She was preparing to bury me under the label of incapacitated. After the confrontation at her office, I stopped hoping Diana would suddenly come to her senses. Ethan helped me dig into the name on the psychiatric evaluation and the lorazepam prescription. Dr. Brady Thornton. And just like I suspected, that doctor wasn't clean. There was no valid medical license under that name in the state registry. No real clinic either. The listed address turned out to be nothing more than a rented mailbox. And the deeper we looked, the worse it smelled. The same name had surfaced in several legal disputes involving adult children seeking conservatorships over elderly parents. Cases where control of the parents' assets was the real prize. At that point, it wasn't just a family problem anymore. It looked like a system. And Diana had stepped right into it. Ethan looked straight at me and said it plainly. "Art, this is organized. Diana didn't come up with this on her own. She hired someone to build a record that says you're mentally unfit, so the court believes it, the bank believes it, the restaurant believes it." I gripped the stack of papers in my hands. Now everything made sense. Lily wasn't the center of Diana's plan. She was the secret Diana was terrified would surface. The real plan was far colder. Strip me of my life through paperwork. Declare me incapable. Take control of everything I owned while I was still alive. At that point, there was no option left, called keeping the peace. Diana had already turned this into a war. She had hidden Lily, built a fake record claiming I was mentally incompetent, and drained money from my account behind my back. If I stayed quiet, I wouldn't just lose my property. I'd lose my right to exist as a person. So Ethan and I made a plan clear and simple. First, protect Lily. Diana would not get near that child. She would not get the chance to twist the story into something like kidnapping or a confused old man being manipulated. Lily's safety had to come before everything else, because once someone starts playing games with lies and legal labels, the only way to survive is to stay 2 steps ahead. And that's exactly what we intended to do. Next, we cut off the money. I changed every password, froze the accounts, and removed Diana's access to anything connected to my bank or legal documents. Then we built the legal file, the fake psychiatric evaluation, the lorazepam prescription, the missing $85,000, the call she made to the restaurant. Every piece of it went into a proper case file, the kind that can stand up in court. And finally, we went on offense. We filed to block any attempt at conservatorship and reported the situation as elder financial abuse, so Diana would lose the ability to stamp me as incapacitated and quietly take control of my life. For the first time in days, I realized something. I wasn't standing alone in the rain anymore. I had Lily, I had Ethan, and we had the one thing that can crush a greedy plan like Diana's: the truth. That night, I didn't return to the Lexington room just to have dinner. I went back for something far more important. I went back to take back my dignity. I walked in with Ethan and Lily, not to start trouble, but to prove one simple thing. I wasn't the confused old man Diana had painted me to be. I was Art Caldwell, a man who still knew exactly what was happening to him and exactly who had tried to do it. When the manager saw me, I could tell she was about to repeat the same line as before. Ethan stepped forward first. He showed his ID and spoke calmly, directly. "Someone called and lied to get you to refuse service to this man. If you'd like, my lawyer can follow up about that." Otherwise, we'll take the table he reserved. The color drained from her face. After a moment, she nodded. And just like that, we were shown inside. I sat down at table 14. I placed Rose's photo beside my glass of water, the way I had planned to do on my birthday. Across from me, Lily swung her legs under the chair and grinned. "Grandpa, you have to eat cake today." For the first time in a long while, the room felt warm, not because of the lights or the fireplace, but because I knew something important. They tried to take my dignity away, but they didn't succeed. And in that moment, I understood something important. The fight wasn't over yet, but I had already taken back the one thing that mattered most: my right to live with dignity. The next day, Ethan and I didn't waste time arguing with Diana again. Arguing is the playground of people who want to drag you into the mud. Instead, we went straight to the one thing Diana feared most: the legal record. Ethan helped me meet with a lawyer. We immediately filed to block any attempt at conservatorship, attaching every piece of evidence we had gathered. The so-called psychiatric evaluation signed by Dr. Brady Thornton, who didn't even have a valid medical license, the lorazepam prescription, the record of nearly $85,000 withdrawn from my account, and even the phone call to the restaurant used to smear me as mentally unstable. The lawyer reviewed the documents quietly for a while. Then he looked up at me and said something I'll never forget. "Mr. Caldwell, you're not someone who needs a guardian." He tapped the folder once. "You're a victim of elder abuse." And hearing that out loud did something powerful. For the first time since Diana started this whole scheme, the story was no longer about whether I was losing my mind. It was about what had been done to me. We didn't stop there. Our lawyer also filed complaints with the medical board and the fraud investigation unit. Within days, the pressure flipped. Diana was no longer the one pushing me into a corner. She was the one being asked questions. Why had she withdrawn the money? Why were there signatures that didn't match? Why had she hired a doctor with no valid license? And for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in her before. Panic, not regret, never that. But the realization that I wasn't the confused old man she had counted on. I was awake. Diana didn't apologize. Instead, she did what people like her always do when they start losing control. She attacked. And she attacked in the dirtiest way possible by using Lily to try to force Ethan and me to back down. Just days after we filed the legal papers, Diana began spreading a new story. She called people she knew, claiming I had become unstable, saying Ethan had manipulated me, even hinting that Lily was being pulled away from her real mother. It was a classic move. Turn the victim into the villain. Because if people believed I was a confused old man. But here's the problem with lies like that. They only work when there's no proof standing in the light. And by that point, we had already started bringing the truth into the open. He sent the lawyer copies of the DNA results, the Portland timeline, and the evidence showing that Elena was actually Diana. Everything went straight into the legal file. My job was simpler, but just as important. I focused on keeping Lily safe. Diana would never be alone with her. No chances for staged scenes. No opportunities for secretly recorded videos twisted out of context. Because by then I understood something clearly. When someone starts losing a battle of documents and facts, they move to their last weapon: emotion, chaos, and sometimes a child. But this time, I wasn't standing alone in the rain anymore. I had Ethan, I had the law, and most importantly, I had a truth that couldn't be bent. Diana thought she could still slither out by changing the story. But she forgot one thing. Paper doesn't care about feelings, and it isn't afraid of anyone. My lawyer submitted the full package of evidence to the court, the kind of combination Diana simply couldn't argue her way around. The DNA results confirming Lily as my biological granddaughter. The Portland timeline proving that Elena was nothing more than an alias Diana used. Bank statements showing nearly $85,000 withdrawn. along with proof that Diana added herself to my account without my knowledge, and the record of Dr. Brady Thornton, a supposed doctor with no valid license, tied to the suspicious lorazepam prescription. When Diana was called in to explain, she still tried to perform the same act. "My father is confused," she said. But this time, the judge wasn't listening to a performance. They were looking at the pattern. And patterns don't lie. The result came quickly. The conservatorship request was denied. The questionable transactions were frozen for investigation. Diana herself became the subject of a probe for elder financial abuse. As for Lily, the court and attorneys arranged safeguards so Diana couldn't simply walk in and take control of the story. No sudden claims, no dramatic accusations about kidnapping. Everything would now go through proper legal channels. For the first time since this whole mess began, the ground under my feet felt solid again. And me? I got back the one thing that mattered most, the right to live my life and make my own decisions. After everything that happened, I realized a bitter truth. People rarely steal your life with a gun at the beginning. They steal it with a label. All it takes is 2 words: confused or mentally declining. The moment that label sticks, every word you say loses weight. If you protest, it becomes delusion. If you defend yourself, it becomes agitation. And while you're still trying to prove you're sane, someone else may already be signing papers, moving money, and locking your life away through perfectly legal procedures. I was lucky. I had Ethan standing beside me, and I had Lily, someone worth fighting for when everything felt like it was collapsing. But the hard truth is, not everyone gets that kind of luck. And that's why stories like this matter. Because the real danger isn't just the person trying to take advantage of you, it's the moment the world starts believing the label instead of the truth. So, if you ever find yourself in the same position I was, looked down on, stripped of your voice, with even your own family telling others you're not right anymore, remember a few things. Keep evidence. Lock down your accounts and documents. Call a lawyer before you call for an argument. And don't be nice in the foolish way just because you're afraid of disturbing the peace. Because fake peace can cost you a very real life. After the court hearing, I didn't feel like I had won in some triumphant way. There was no cheering, no sense of revenge. It felt more like someone had finally loosened a rope that had been tightening around my neck. I could breathe again. Lily spent more time with Ethan after that. Her life became steadier, quieter, no longer pulled into the lies adults were trying to spin around her. She still called me Grandpa Art the way she always had, and every time I heard those words, it felt like I had been given back a small piece of the life Diana tried to bury. As for Diana, she could no longer play the role of the good daughter in front of the world. Once the fake paperwork, the medication, and the missing money were dragged into the light, every mask fell away. And only then did she understand something simple. Putting the label confused on someone else doesn't make them weak. It only makes your own guilt clearer. I went back home, locked the safe with my documents, rewrote my will, and settled one thing firmly in my mind. Silence doesn't protect a family. Silence only helps the wrong person rewrite your life. I don't know if life will ever look perfect again from here. But I do know one thing for certain. And me, I will never let anyone turn me into a man who has to ask permission just to exist. I'm 70 years old. Yes. But being 70 doesn't mean I have to hand over the keys to my house, my bank accounts, or the right to decide my own life to anyone, even my own child. People often use age as an excuse to take power away from you. And if you stay quiet, they'll call that silence consent. When I watch Lily laughing and see Ethan carrying her across the yard, I've come to understand something clearly. Family isn't just the people who share your last name. Family is the people who protect you when you're vulnerable, not the ones who take advantage of that moment. So if you've listened this far, remember this. When someone starts putting the label confused on you, ask yourself a simple question. What do they want to take from you? Then prepare the things that actually protect you. Evidence, a lawyer, and a calm mind. Because you don't have to be young to be strong. You just have to stay clear-headed.